Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you all will be doing fine. My name is Dr. Aftab Anwar and I am Assistant Professor of Pediatric Gastroenterology at Lahore General Hospital, Lahore. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic which is not only important from exam point of view but also in our practical life. So today's topic is acute watery diarrhea. The outcomes of today's lecture are at the end you will be able to define what is acute watery diarrhea. You will know the important epidemiology, etiology, and pathogenesis of diarrhea. You will be able to classify and manage diarrhea and also know the important complications of diarrhea. So, acute diarrhea is defined as passage of three or more stool in 24 hours, the consistency of which is softer than usual for a child, or passage of one watery stool is defined as acute diarrhea. Dysentery is a syndrome characterized by frequent small stools containing visible blood, often accompanied by fever, tenesmus, and abdominal pain. The diarrhea can be classified as acute diarrhea and chronic diarrhea. It is classified according to the duration for which the child is suffering. We call it as acute when the duration is less than 14 days and chronic when the duration is more than 14 days. Persistent diarrhea starts as acute diarrhea but its duration is prolonged, so it is called as persistent diarrhea. You should be able to remember what is acute diarrhea, persistent diarrhea, and chronic diarrhea. So, why diarrhea is important for our community? It is the fourth most common cause of childhood mortality overall. It causes 8.6% of deaths in the childhood. About 1 billion episodes of diarrhea occur yearly worldwide. And in terms of disability, it affects 45 million children. 23% of the episodes occur in South Asia, the second highest among the world, followed by Africa. Acute diarrheal episodes occur 3 to 4 times per year for our children. The maximum incidence of getting diarrhea is during the first year of life. It is responsible for 40 to 50% of hospital admissions. It causes 2.5 lakh death in children which are less than 5 years of age, and in our community it is an important factor for malnutrition in our children. This is the world map according to the incidence of acute diarrhea. This is Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Burma, Afghanistan, and Iran, which are highlighted in green. So you can see that 20 to 50% is the incidence of getting acute diarrhea in our area. This is Africa and this is South America. This is another map which is showing the number of deaths per 100,000 people. And this is Pakistan, which is highlighted in green, and you can see that it is acute diarrhea is responsible for about 25 to 50 deaths from diarrheal diseases per 100,000 person per year. Now, the diarrhea can occur due to both infective etiology and non-infective etiology. When we talk about of infective causes, the most common is viruses, and among viruses, it is the rotavirus, which is responsible for 40% of overall cases of acute diarrhea, followed by enteric adenovirus. The bacteria which can cause acute diarrhea are E. coli, which is responsible for 25% of overall cases, followed by Salmonella in 10% of cases, and Shigella and Vibrio cholera. Staphylococcus aureus, Campylobacter jejuni, and Yersinia enterolytica are some other causes of bacterial diarrhea. When we talk of parasites, E. coli, Giardia lambelia, Entamoeba histolytica, Giardia lambelia, and Cryptosporidium are important causes. And among fungi, Candida albicans can cause acute diarrhea. The important non-infectious agents which can cause diarrhea are parenteral infections such as otitis media, pneumonia, and UTI. Similarly, diarrheal factors which can cause diarrhea are overfeeding, starvation, and various food allergies. Apart from above agents, drugs such as antibiotics can also cause acute diarrhea. Now, some slides for the epidemiology of acute diarrhea. As we have discussed previously, that it is the leading cause of morbidity and mortality in our children. The major route of transmission from person to person is due to fecal-oral route and close personal contact. Factors which increase the susceptibility to diarrhea are lack of breastfeeding, malnutrition, unhygienic conditions, measles, contaminated food or water, and level of maternal education. So this is another chart showing the number of childhood deaths from diarrheal diseases by risk factors. This was the situation in 1990s, and just recently comparison has been shown with 2017. So the most common cause is unsafe water source which leads to acute diarrhea, followed by childhood growth failure, unsafe sanitation, no access to hand washing facility, vitamin A deficiency, suboptimal breastfeeding, low birth weight and short gestation, and lastly zinc deficiency. So when we talk about the causes of deaths from diarrhea, the most common cause is rotavirus, followed by cholera and Shigella. Amoebiasis and Cryptosporidium are less or least common causes of deaths from diarrheal diseases in children. So, what is the pathogenesis of acute diarrhea? In diarrhea, there is excessive loss of water and electrolytes in the stool. The mechanism of action is different by various organisms, but it is the loss of diarrhea and electrolytes which leads to such disastrous results in children. Now we will discuss one by one the pathogenesis of various agents which cause acute diarrhea. The most common was rotavirus diarrhea, but the exact mechanism by which it damages the intestine is not known. It invades the intestinal cells and alters their functioning and reproduction. It causes shedding of mucosal cell with loss of disaccharidases. Disaccharidases are enzymes present at the tip of intestinal villi. Their loss results in osmotic diarrhea as the patient is unable to metabolize the lactose which is present in milk. It causes failure of digestion of lactose and other disaccharidases, and the enzyme is regained only when the mucosal surface regenerates. Now, the pathogenesis of enterotoxigenic E. coli. Diarrhea caused by E. coli results from action of toxins released by bacteria which affect the intestinal mucosa. It has two toxins, that are heat labile toxin and heat stable toxin. The heat labile toxin binds to the epithelial surface of enterocyte and activate adenyl cyclase system. There is accumulation of cyclic AMP which cause massive secretion of sodium and chloride in the gut lumen by the mucosal cells, but the glucose stimulated sodium absorptions remain intact. The heat stable enterotoxin activates guanylate cyclase system. This also increases the secretory activity of the gut. Similarly, the recovery from diarrhea occurs by replacement of affected cells by the regeneration, which occurs in the 2 to 5 days. But during this period, the toxins have resulted in the damage to the child in terms of dehydration and malnutrition. The enteroinvasive organisms, which are Shigella and Salmonella, cause invasion of the enterocytes and result in necrosis and ulcer formation in the small intestine, leading to diarrhea, which contains blood and mucus in the stools. It presents as fever, abdominal cramps, tenesmus, and small volume of bloody mucoid stools with many pus cells present in the stool. In the last few words about Vibrio cholera, the organisms adhere to the mucosa of small intestine and multiply over there. They also produce a heat labile enterotoxin which attaches to the receptors of GM1 gangliosides on the gut epithelium. After attachment, they activate adenyl cyclase system to produce increased amount of cyclic AMP. AMP causes decreased absorption of sodium and chloride, resulting in net loss of water and electrolytes. So, whenever a child of acute diarrhea presents to you, you would take the history in which you will ask the presenting complaints that whether it is loose motion, vomiting, and fever. If the child presents with loose motion, you will ask about the duration, frequency, grade of the stools, presence of blood and mucus in the stool. So, by the history, you will be able to differentiate various causes of acute diarrhea. You will also ask about the color of the stool, as rice water stool is common in cholera. Then, if the child presents with vomiting, you will ask about the duration, frequency of vomiting, the relation with food, nature of the vomiting, the quantity and color of vomitus, and whether blood is present in the vomitus or not. Similarly, for fever, you will ask the duration of the fever, pattern of the fever, its and associated factors. The illnesses which can present along with diarrhea are respiratory tract infections, measles, and UTI. For quantification of dehydration, it's important to ask about the urinary habits of the child, that whether the child has passed urine during the last 6 hours or not, and what was the quantity of the urine. In dehydration, the amount of the urine usually decreases. Similarly, some associated illnesses such as abdominal pain or distension, history of seizures, past history of diarrhea, any treatment taken in recent times, as we have discussed previously, that antibiotics can also result in diarrhea. The feeding history of the child is important, as the child is breastfed or not, because diarrhea is usually severe in the top fed children. And developmental history, vaccination history are usually the part of the history taken. Similarly, we will ask about any measles or tuberculosis contact and social and family history of the child. Examination of a child with acute diarrhea is particularly important, as it will help us to classify the degree of dehydration, which we will discuss later. But the important points which should be noted while examining a child with diarrhea are the general behavior of the child, whether he is drowsy, irritable, or comatose. On general physical examination, the pulse, temperature, respiratory rate, blood pressure, skin perfusion, and weight of the child should be noted. You should look for the mucous membranes, whether they are normal or dry. The skin turgor, which is normal or decreased. Eyes should be looked for the evidence of tears and whether they are sunken or not sunken. Also, haziness of the cornea should be checked for vitamin A deficiency. In the children less than 2 years, the fontanella can be palpated, whether they are open or closed, and full or depressed or bulging. Similarly, abdomen should be examined for any distension, bowel sounds, whether they are present or diminished or absent, or any mass palpable. The examination of CNS and respiratory system can be carried out to find any associated abnormality. Usually, acute diarrhea patient can be evaluated on clinical basis only, but some investigations which can help us are CBC. In CBC, we can look for the TLC to look for the evidence of any bacterial infection. We can send stool complete examination for pH and reducing substances, Giardia cysts and entamoeba, bioassay of E. coli, presence of leukocytes and RBCs which can lead us to dysentery. Stool culture and sensitivity are sometimes important, as the funding organism can be cultured, and if we are suspecting rotavirus diarrhea, the ELISA test for rotavirus diarrhea is also available. Serum electrolytes should be sent for sodium, potassium, and bicarbonate assays for evidence of any parenteral infection. Urine complete examination and culture along with blood culture can be sent. The end result of any diarrhea will be dehydration, and it's the dehydration which results loss of water, loss of nutrients, loss of bicarbonate and potassium in the patient. The loss of water will result in loss of skin turgor, weak or absent pulse, tachycardia, sunken eyes, sunken anterior fontanelle, husky voice, sometimes peripheral cyanosis, dry mucous membranes, cold clammy skin, and anguria and uremia. Loss of nutrients will cause hypoglycemia, coma, convulsions, and if the loss of nutrients is prolonged, it can also result in malnutrition. Loss of bicarbonate will cause vomiting and retching, deep respiration, irritability, and sometimes can result in decreased myocardic contractility. While potassium loss can result in abdominal distension, paralytic ileus, and sustained shock in severe cases. Now, whenever the child will present to you with acute diarrhea, you will have to grade the stools so that the severity of diarrhea can be classified. This is the WHO stool grading chart. Grade 1 are the normal form stools, or the stools are of normal consistency. Grade 2 is said when the stools are softer than the normal consistency for that child. Grade 3 are just like custard. They are so liquid that when you put them in a container, they take the shape of the container in which they are put. Grade 4 are watery stools, but they are opaque due to presence of flakes in the stool, while grade 5 are watery and translucent. The light will pass through the stool as few flakes are present in them. There are two types of classification systems which are used for classification of dehydration. These are clinical and biochemical. Clinical classification is mild, moderate, and severe dehydration. We say it as mild when the weight loss is less than 5% in acute diarrhea, moderate when the weight loss is 5 to 10%, and severe when the weight loss is more than 10%. Similarly, biochemically, we can classify dehydration as isotonic when the serum sodium is between 130 to 150 millimole per liter, hypotonic when the serum sodium is less than 130, and hypertonic dehydration when the serum sodium is more than 150 millimole per liter. For clinical classification of acute diarrhea, we will have some question which will you ask from the mother and other symptoms you will look for. So, whenever a child presents with diarrhea, you will ask the duration of the diarrhea, for how long the diarrhea is present, and if there is any blood in the stools, so we can diagnose whether it is acute diarrhea due to viral causes or it's dysentery. Similarly, on examination, you will look for the general condition of the child, whether he is lethargic or unconscious, or restless or irritable. You look for the eye signs, that whether the eyes are normal or sunken. Then you will ask the mother, or you can yourself offer some fluid to the child and see that if he is able to drink the fluid or drinking eagerly, which shows that the child is thirsty, or he is not able to drink the fluid. You will pinch the abdominal skin and record the time for its retrieval, that whether it is normal, which is less than 2 seconds, and prolonged, which is more than 2 seconds. In this slide, the method of skin pinch has been shown. You pinch the area of skin in the mid clavicular line over the abdomen, just like this, and if it stand out like this for more than 2 seconds, we say it that the skin pinch test it goes very slowly. Otherwise, if the skin normalizes in less than 2 seconds, the dehydration is usually normal of that child. Previous questions, we will classify the degree of dehydration as no dehydration, some dehydration, and severe dehydration. If there are not enough signs to classify as some or severe dehydration, it is said that the child has no dehydration. You will follow plan A, which consists of giving extra fluid and ORS to the child, continue his normal diet, ask the mother to follow up in 5 days if the child is not improving. However, if the child was restless and irritable at presentation, on examination you saw that the eyes were sunken, or when you offered the fluid, the child drank it eagerly, and the skin pinch goes back slowly, which is more than 2 seconds. Any of the two signs from the four of these will classify the child as some dehydration. For this, we will follow the plan B, which consists of giving extra food and fluid for the child. However, if the child has some other severe classification, we will refer him to the hospital with the mother, during which the mother will give frequent oral sips and continue her breastfeeding. And if the child was lethargic or unconscious, had sunken eyes, was not able to drink or drank poorly, and the skin pinch went back very slowly. Two of these four signs, if present, will classify the child as having severe dehydration. For severe dehydration, we follow the plan C, in which we have to give IV or fluids through NG to the child. These will be discussed later, but at present you should be able to classify the dehydration as no dehydration, some dehydration, severe dehydration on the basis of the questions which we have asked in the previous slide, and also the signs which are eye signs, skin pinch, and whether the child is able to drink or not. A simplified classification for comparison has been given here. In no hot dehydration, the child's condition is usually the child is alert, The eye signs are normal. Tears are normally present. The mouth and tongue are moist. When you will offer the child to drink, he will drink normally. Skin pinch will go back quickly, and the plan for treatment will be plan A. In some dehydration, the child may be restless or irritable. The eyes may be sunken. Tears may be dry. Similarly, the mouth and tongue will be dry. The child will be thirsty and drink eagerly. Skin pinch will go slowly. If two or more of the above signs are present, it will be classified as some dehydration, for which plan B will be advised to the child. And in severe dehydration, the child will be lethargic or unconscious, having severely sunken eyes. The tears might be absent. Mouth and tongue will be dry. This child will drink poorly due to unconsciousness or may not be able to drink. The skin pinch will go back very slowly, and if there are two or more of the above signs present, we will classify it as severe dehydration and go for plan C. The dehydration is a result of the fluid loss from the body, and we can assess that how much fluid has been lost from the body, because in no dehydration the fluid loss is usually less than 50 milliliters per kilogram of the child's weight. In some dehydration it will be 50 to 100 ml per kg, and in severe dehydration it is usually more than 100 ml per kg. So after classification of dehydration, we will move towards the management of child presented with acute diarrhea. The management steps consist of replacement of fluids and electrolytes, drug therapy, which consists of antibiotics, anti-secretory and anti-motility agents, nutrition management of the child, and follow-up after discharge to ensure proper recovery. We have discussed previously plan A, B and C for some, moderate, and for no, moderate and severe dehydration previously. Now we will discuss in detail what is plan A, plan B and plan C. Plan A is for no dehydration. It usually consists of continuation of feed, and ORS is the main pillar of plan A. To the child who is prescribed plan A is usually treated at home, during which the mother gives him or her extra fluids, continue feeding, and some danger signs are taught to the mother. So if they are present, she can bring the child to the hospital. We will tell the mother to breastfeed the child. The duration can be increased at each feed. If the child is exclusively breastfed, ORS is given in addition to the kid who is 6 months or older. And if the child is not exclusively breastfed, food-based fluids such as soup, rice water and yogurt drinks can also be given apart from ORS. Mother is taught that how the ORS can be reconstituted at home. Usually one pack is mixed in 1 liter of water or 4 glasses of water. For up to 2 years, 50 to 100 ml ORS can be given after each diarrheal episode, and if the child is older than 2 years, 100 to 200 ml of fluid of ORS can be given after each diarrheal episode. The mother should be counseled to continue breastfeeding and weaning foods which the child is already taking, and if there are danger signs such as diarrhea persists beyond 3 days, there is increased volume and frequency of stools at home despite treatment, blood becomes visible in the stool, the child refuses to feed or has repeated vomiting episodes, or there is increased thirst, or the child develops fever, the mother should be advised to return to hospital for re-evaluation. This is the composition of common ORS which is present at home. It is also called as WHO or UNICEF ORS. It consists of 2.6 gram per liter of sodium chloride, 1.5 potassium chloride, 13.5 gram per liter of glucose, 2.9 gram per liter of trisodium citrate dihydrate, and the total osmolality is 20.5. When we mix it in 1 liter of water, it provides 75 millimoles of sodium, 20 millimole of potassium, 75 millimoles per liter of glucose, 65 millimoles of chloride, and 10 millimole per liter of citrate, making the total osmolality as 245 millimoles per liter. If the ORS is not available at home, the mother can be taught to make homemade ORS, which can be constituted by mixing 6 teaspoons of sugar and half level teaspoon of salt in 1 liter of water. For some dehydration, plan B is advised. It consists of giving ORS to the child. Similar to plan A, fluids are calculated, but at it is a higher degree of dehydration is present in child, more fluids are given to him. For up to 10 kg, 100 ml of per kg of fluids are needed. For 10 to 20 kg, 100 ml of 100 ml per kg of fluids for first 10 kgs, and then 50 ml per kg of extra fluid are given if the child weighs from 10 to 20 kilograms. For example, if the child is of 15 kg, the fluid will become 100 ml per 100 ml for first 10 kg, that is 1000 mils, and 500 mils for next 5 kg. As the child weight is 15 kilogram, the total fluids will be 1500 mils per kg, which will be given to the child. Similarly, if the child is more than 20 kilograms, 1500 mils for the first 20 kgs, and then additional 20 mils per kg will be given if the child is more than 20 kilogram. These are the normal fluid requirements of any child, whether he presents with diarrhea or otherwise. For deficit replacement, about 75 ml per kg of ORS is given over 4 hours, and the child is reassessed for 4 hours that whether he has no dehydration, some dehydration, and severe dehydration, and again another plan is advised according to the grade of the dehydration which is present after 4 hours, and in the same manner the child can be classified after every 4 hours until becomes stable or has present or has no dehydration after classification. If the mother wants to leave before completing the treatment, you show her to you show her how to prepare ORS solution at home. Similarly, you will show her that how much ORS is needed to be given during 4 hours treatment and explain 3 rules of home treatment that are give extra fluids, continue feeding as in plan A, and when to return if the child becomes sick. Now, the plan for severe dehydration, which usually needs IV fluids or fluid through NG, is the plan C. In this, the child has more dehydration, so the child cannot be advised to go home and is usually admitted in hospital. Here, the fluids are calculated as 100 ml per kg of fluid and should be given in 6 hours if the child is less than 1 year. Fluids are similar 100 ml per kg, but they are given over 3 hours or 2.5 hours if the child is more than 1 year of age. For example, a child of 10 kg comes to you with severe dehydration. The total fluids will be 100 into 10, which comes up to be 1000 ml per kg. During the first hour, 30 ml per kg, 300 mils of fluid will be given if the child is less than 12 months of age, and the remaining 700 will be given in the next 45 hours. And after fluids, the child will again be assessed for dehydration, that whether it is present or not, and if needed, again the child can be given oral fluids or IV fluids according to the classification in which the child falls. Apart from fluid management, nutritional management during the diarrhea is also important, during which if the child is breastfeeding, it should be continuous. There are many myths in our society that breastfeeding causes diarrhea, and during diarrhea the breastfeeding should be discontinued. It leads to malnutrition during the children and the exaggeration of diarrhea, so you should counsel the mother to continue breastfeed or the usual feed which the child is taken. The foods which can be advised during diarrheal episodes are khichdi, rice, banana, potatoes, and dalia. These are easily available in our society and are very cheap. Feeding should be given every 2 to 3 hourly during the diarrheal episodes. Food with high fiber content should be avoided, like fruits and vegetables, which can lead to worsening of diarrhea. And if the child is not breastfeeding, as we have discussed previously, the usual milk should be given to the child, but the diluted milk should never be given. Apart from nutritional management, zinc supplementation is given to the child, which consists of a single dose of 20 milligram of elemental zinc given daily for children which are more than 6 months of age. The duration of treatment is 14 days, and nowadays it is routinely given with ORS. Antibiotics have no role in acute diarrheal episodes caused by rotavirus diarrhea. They are only prescribed when there is evidence of bacillary dysentery, giardiasis, cholera, and amoebiasis. Anti-motility agents decrease the motility of the gut and are not recommended, as they result in overgrowth of bacteria and deleterious effects to the health of the child. Apart from these two conditions, if there are signs of sepsis such as poor sucking, abdominal distension, fever or hyperthermia, and hypercapnia during acute diarrhea, antibiotics can be prescribed on order of consultant. Apart from these drugs, nowadays probiotics are very common. There are many probiotics present in the market, but the probiotic Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG has shown effect during acute diarrhea in form of decreased diarrheal episodes. There is no effect on the duration of diarrhea, which usually continues for 7 to 10 days. And if the child is vomiting very often, ondansetron can be prescribed to the child as it has less systemic effects. The diarrhea can be prevented in our children by promotion of exclusive breastfeeding. Breastfeeding during first 6 months of the life protects infant from diarrheal disease. It promotes passive immunity and reduces the intake of potentially contaminated food and water. It also contains all the nutrients which are needed during the early infancy and diminishes the adverse impact of diarrhea on nutritional status of infant. Apart from breastfeeding, vaccination for rotavirus and cholera are available. Rotavirus, rotavirus vaccination has been integrated into the vaccination schedule in our country, so it is available and given on 10th and 14th week of age, 10th and 14th age. Apart from immunization, the water and sanitation should be improved, as well as the promotion of personal and domestic hygiene in our children. The common complications which can result as from acute diarrhea are shock due to loss of fluid, metabolic acidosis, paralytic ileus due to loss of potassium, convulsions. Repeated diarrheal episodes can lead to malnutrition, and in severe cases, the fluid loss may result in acute renal failure, DIC, and even death. This was all about acute watery diarrhea. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.